What's up guys, Damian Keyes here, welcome back to the channel. So I've got a big debate rumbling today. So Billboard have come out and said they've done a survey and half of the people they have surveyed will not be rushing back to concerts anytime soon. And even if they are allowed, they've said 50% of them will wait at least a month, if not longer, before they start buying those concerts and going to gigs. On top of that, talent agency UTA have said that other than 50% of people that won't be returning, 28% of people within that survey have bought live sessions or live streams from their favorite artists during this lockdown. So where is this going? What does that mean for touring artists? Because we are now facing huge problems coming up. Apart from the fact that we know venues are closing down, there are also some other massive problems. For example, travel costs are now about to go up because it's a lot harder to travel across the world than it was 12 months ago. Instead of going from one place to another, you're probably going to have to go via other places. On top of that, the travel costs, you've also got the visas. For example, if you're not from the US but you want to go touring in the US, you need a work visa, which means you need one of two types of visa. An O visa, which is an individual of extraordinary talent, or a P visa, which is for groups of sustained international renown. Effectively, you need one of those two visas to be allowed into the US to go on tour. Now, those visas used to cost $460, but now they've gone up to $700. But with all that said, some artists are already booking for 2021 and some are taking a huge gamble and booking for very early in the year, January, February and March. If you're looking at Little Big Town, Harry Styles, Avril Lavigne, even bands like The Who, the Ancient Rockers, are already booking in for the first couple of months. Now, we are seeing some crazy times in Europe where the numbers are going higher and higher. So there's a good chance that those tours might get cancelled. And if they are cancelled, then there's a good chance that there won't be the insurance. Now, can you imagine how much money is going into promoting those shows right now in order to fill the amount of a venue that someone like Harry Styles would play? It's going to take a lot of organization, it's going to take a lot of capital, it's going to take a lot of promotion. And while the US might be allowing some gigs, we also know that Europe, Australia and Canada, there's a good chance you aren't going to be able to get in them. So these massive artists are going to struggle. But let's talk about smaller artists as well. What happens if you are putting on a gig, you have sold some tickets, and then all of a sudden they get cancelled late in 21 because there's another resurgence? Well, what that means is you've got that classic phrase, force majeure, which basically is circumstances outside of your control, whether that's an act of God or whether it's the government saying, nope, you are not allowed to play that gig. If you don't have that force majeure, it means it's gonna cost you a lot of money. And let's face it, insurance policies are probably not going to cover coronavirus because they're saying, if you're stupid enough to go and put a tour on in 2021 and then it comes back to hit you, we're not covering you for that. So you're going to take that gamble on your own. Now, I'm sure we're all in agreement that normality will resume, whether that's in 6 months or 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, or even 5 years down the line. I'm sure we can agree that at some point this will go away and there will be some normality. The issue, as we're all facing, is how do we last that long? How do venues last that long? And what technology is coming along in the meantime to replace it? As soon as Napster hit the deck, all of a sudden the writing was on the wall for CDs. Does that mean that because of live streams, because of virtual gigs or virtual reality gigs, does that mean it's the end of touring and the end of gigs? Well, no, probably not, because it's always been about supply and demand. If you look at how concerts started, let's go back to, say, the 17th century, where a lot of the concerts were at universities, especially places like Oxford and Cambridge, where you turn up to go and watch a performance. Then fast forward to the 1900s, and all of a sudden you get jazz gigs. And those jazz gigs would tend to be at community centres, or they might be at jazz halls, and you would pay tickets to go and watch. But then concerts and touring as we know it really started after World War II, around 1950 to 1960, with the emergence of massive artists like Elvis and the Beatles, and all of a sudden that supply and demand was there, and it started to grow. And then in 1969 we saw Woodstock, and Woodstock was the start, the beginning of the huge festival. It was the popularization of getting multiple acts together and having the biggest party festival for a day, 2 days, or 3 days. And now we have things like Coachella and other huge festivals all of the time, but we don't know when they're going to come back. We don't know if they'll be here in 2021 or 2022. So the supply and demand thing is very, very crucial to this debate. And as demand grew back in the day for more gigs and more tours and more concerts, now that consumption and that demand is starting to wane. People aren't sure about going to concerts. I know at the moment they can't, but even when it comes back. But we are starting to get the demand for live stream concerts. We are starting to get the demand for possibly socially distant concerts. How is that going to look long term? We are starting to get the demand for virtual reality concerts. So is that going to be the future? So this is my belief. I personally believe that over time this will come back, but I feel like we won't be in the same position that we've been in before. I feel like there will be an evolution, the same way as CDs are still around, but we don't use them as much because of streaming. I believe there will be high-end concerts. I believe there will be low-end concerts, and I think what will happen is you will get a lot of underground gigs. I think we'll go back to that time where people are putting on gigs in garages, or they're putting on gigs in their living rooms, or they're putting on gigs in fields outside of town because it's cheap. Because if you think about the cost price of putting on a small festival, it could easily mount up to $100,000. But if you look at the ticket prices when you're looking at a socially distant gig, you can't make that back again. So in order to cut costs, we're going to have to find venues which at the moment might not even exist in 2 years' time. So we'll start looking at ways that we can go well underground. We're going back to the days where we're building up that demand from what was jazz halls and community centres to probably community centres and people's barns. Now this will make it tougher to tour, because whilst it's easy to find an underground gig at a rehearsal room or a garage or someone's living room party in your town, in your city, it's a lot tougher to do that 2, 3, 4, 5 hours away. It's very tough to do that as a string of gigs to make it up a tour. But I do feel like demand will come back. I do feel like music and creativity will find a way. I think the top end bands will be fine. I think they'll probably put their prices up, and I think we'll probably end up seeing a hike in ticket prices at some point. So instead of seeing 10 gigs a month, you might only go and see 5, and you're very careful with that, with which ones you're going to see. But I think from our point of view of the underground, I think venues will struggle long term. We've just seen the demise of cinemas and a lot of theatres going under. Live venues are no different. But I think there's one big crucial difference, which is different from streaming versus CD. I think it's different from anything else, which is that feeling you get when you are at the gig, that feeling that you get when you are at the concert or the sporting event. It's just not the same watching it virtually. It's not the same watching it as a stream. And even though it's okay, and in this time we don't have a choice, that feeling of being in that sweaty venue or hearing the acoustics of the actual venue, that's never going to go. It's never going to change. So it might be a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but I think it will come back. I think we will get back to that time. The issue is, I think it's going to go down first, and then it's going to come back up. Classic supply and demand. At the moment, the demand is going to go away. We're going to lose venues. So when it comes back, it's going to come back looking differently. And at that point, it's how we adapt as musicians and artists to whatever is coming back. So this is the start of a debate. I have a question for you. When do you think touring will come back in your country, and more importantly across the world? Because you might be in a place in America which isn't highly affected, or you might be in a country which hasn't been that affected. But I can promise you at this point, in this date, Europe has been massively affected. And so have other countries. And Australia are talking about not letting anyone in for another 13 to 15 months. So all of these things mean world tours are very much disrupted. So I want to know, what do you think? When do you think tours will start back again? When do you think, and more importantly, what do you think will be different? Because it's obviously going to change with the evolution. How do you think the touring artist, what will they look like in 2022 or 2023? I want all of your thoughts and your feelings, all of that in the comments below, because I love reading this stuff, and this futuristic stuff, that's my bag. Anyway, do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. That like button really makes a difference. It helps this video go and it helps build this community, and that's what this is about. Come and join this community and be a part of it, because this is a tough time and we do all need to stick together. And more importantly, if you do want to work with me on more of a one-to-one basis, then the link for DK Music Business Academy is below. That's a place where I can work with you on your music. I'm in the group every single day. On top of that, there's live sessions twice a week, and there's hundreds of hours of content from myself and other artists and music industry specialists who are awesome. So if you want to be a part of that, then click that link below. Otherwise, go and make some awesome music, and I'll see you tomorrow.